and welcome back to my channel. This is Marla and I'm so glad that you're joining me today for a new Scrappy Tail Crafts video. Today's video features one of the dies from the Adventure Awaits release. It is called Tent and Campfire. Here's a look at this large die set. You can see there are two different trees, a campfire, a lantern, a sleeping bag, and a tent. I am not using either the tent or the campfire, but I will be creating a nature scene card showing how you can use some of the other pieces in the collection. I'm starting with one of my trees and some paper tray inks. I'm starting with green parakeet and just laying that color down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of shading with the spring moss, which is more obviously of a mossy green. For the trunk of the tree, I chose a really dark chocolate ink. And then here's where I'm adding that little bit of spring moss just to add a little bit of color variation, which in my photographs is really hard to see, but in person it actually shows up. So it will dry back quite a bit, but the outside edges are definitely slightly darker than the center of the tree. So here is our tree stump, and I'm going to use one color, and this is going to be cocoa bean. I'll start by adding a layer of that color to the stump. Using the same color, I'm just going to darken and intensify the bottom edges on the left, right, and bottom of the card. And then when you do cut a tree down, the center is slightly lighter, so I added some craft ink to that. Moving on to my sleeping bag, I'm using Summer Sunrise, which is a brighter orange, and then I'm going to add some shading with a terracotta tile, which is more of an orange brown, so it's going to add just a little bit of depth of color to the sleeping bag. And then off camera, I use that spring moss again really intensely. There's two little pieces that are the ties for the sleeping bag, and I did use that moss, spring moss, just to add a little bit of contrast. We're going to start putting some of this together, and I am using my precision glue gun, which I am absolutely loving. I added a little bit too much of that glue to that left side, so I'm just going to wipe some of that up. I'll use my reverse tweezers to add the contrasting green ties to my bag. And then I do like to add dimensions, so later on I am going to layer this up. I believe I put 3 or 4 different layers to the sleeping bag just to give it a little bit of a pop, and I'm going to do the same thing with this lantern. I happen to have some antique lanterns from my mother-in-law, and I went with the same red color that mine are, so I wanted something that was really going to pop against my background. And then for the glow of the lantern, I brought in a yellow, so the red is pure poppy and this is bright buttercup. For my flame, I believe I used the Summer Sunrise and a little bit of the bright buttercup. Once I start assembling it, as you'll see, I need to add just a little bit more of that orange color to the flame because I felt like it was getting lost in the background of that bright buttercup. So I'll start adding the flame, and then I'll quickly take it off and add that additional depth of color. So you want to put the flame underneath the cross sections. I started to put the cross sections on and then realized that I needed that flame to go underneath because it would be hidden behind. And these are all so easy to put together. I don't know if you've ever purchased any of the Scrappy Tail Crafts dies, but Sabrina does such a beautiful job of adding embossing to the base layers of each of the pieces, so you know exactly where the layers should be going, and you can get that beautiful dimension with little effort. I'm going to add the handle. I need to move it off of my Altenew mat. I really love using this mat because it does hold my pieces much better than I used to use a Cricut mat, and this holds the pieces much better. It also holds my ink cubes, so I don't have to have one of those, you know, separate little holders for my ink cubes. They just hold on easy to this mat. So here's where I'm, okay, 4 layers. I'm adding 4 layers to the back of this. And this again is going to give me just a little bit of dimension. One of the things that I didn't do in hindsight, and I probably should have went back and done, is I didn't go around the edges. Typically I go around the edges with my oranges. I would have used the terracotta tile just to cover up some of that white, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I just didn't do it on this one. I'm going to add 3 layers to the lantern. Now the stump I did off camera, and I added 2 layers, so there's 1 extra layer to the stump. So each of the layers progressively gets just a little bit thicker so that the dimension is a little bit different on each of the pieces. Because the lantern will be sitting on a stump, I am going to add just a tiny little piece of foam tape behind the upper portion of that lantern before I adhere it. Moving on to my background, this is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding card base. This is not a panel. It's actually direct to ink, direct to the base. And I'm starting out with a blueberry sky, which is going to be my lightest color. You'll notice when I do my ink blending for nature scenes or for any type of scene building, I am not quite as worried about the blend as I am when I am blending just background colors, which is a little bit different than doing the scene building. I did add a piece of washi tape to the bottom of my panel, adding a little bit darker color to the left and the bottom of this scene. I'm going to bring in a purple color, which is called Royal Velvet, and this is just going to add more depth to my background. I'm just using a little bit of the Royal Velvet in the center. You could see where I added just a little bit of the purple in the center, and I made sure that most of the ink was off of my brush before I added that purple to the center, because I didn't want it to be really dark. So here I'm just kind of taking a look, seeing how it's going to look against the background. Now keep in mind that this is going to dry as well, so it's not going to be quite as splotchy. And then I'm also going to be adding a little bit more texture to the background, which will also detract from some of the blotchiness. Here I'm just blending in a little bit more of the blueberry sky. And then once I add that, I'm going to use a dark indigo, which will be my final color. It's obviously a dark blue color. I'll add it to the left and the right side outer edges, making sure not to completely cover that purple. And then where I have that large area of the blueberry sky, I'm going to add this dark indigo around some of the edges of that, and that again is going to add some of that blending smoothness to my background. Here I'm going to remove the washi tape, and then I'm going to place it on the top. You can see that I did get a little bit of a line. I was a little bit careless there, but I'm not worried about it because this brown is going to cover it up. So this is the lighter of the browns, I believe. It should be the cocoa bean. And again, the outside edges are going to be a little bit darker. I'm not going to use 2 tones. Just adding a deeper concentration of color in different areas is going to give me the variation in browns that I'm looking for. Once I get all of this blended, you know what I'm going to do. I love adding some water splatters, and so I will be using my Distress Sprayer from Tim Holtz, spritzing into my hand, and my favorite way to apply it is to clap it over the top. Now I'm going to apologize for a little bit of that movement of my camera. I did have my cord. I have a cord for my battery, and it was so close that I kept hitting it, so I apologize for that. So here's where we're really going to step that up. I am going to start using some white gouache and adding that. So I wet my watercolor brush, spritzed my white gouache, and then I am going to be super heavy-handed with this. When you think you have enough, you don't have enough. Keep adding more. The more the merrier. I just think that the more splatters that you add to that background sky really gives it that beautiful wilderness star feel. And so here I'm going to start laying out my pieces. So again, this is just a really simple scene, but I wanted to show how you can get different looks with this die set. If you go to the Scrappy Tail Crafts Instagram account, I will link that in the description box below. There are so many beautiful examples of this die set being used with the tent. In fact, my good friend Sharon Luska did this fabulous card. It was a Barbie inspired card, and I just thought it was so beautiful with the bright pink tent. But I wanted to add, to just show how it can be used in a different way. You don't always have to use all of the dies in your scene building. For the trees, I'm just adding a little bit of glue to the outside edges. I'm really not worried about gluing down the entire tree. I'm going to add my stump, and then I will also add my lantern and my sleeping bag, and you'll get to see how that little bit of dimension just adds a little pop to this background. Now for my sentiment, I did stamp out the words happy trails. I thought that that was an appropriate sentiment for this set. There are many beautiful dies and sentiments in the Stampin' Dies that were released that are adventure related. I just wanted to use something that was a little bit different, that was a little bit smaller. You're going to see here where my decision process is just going to waver a little bit. So I know that I want to add just a slight bit of dimension. So I have these very thin, very small foam dots. Foam squares actually. I'm going to cut them in half and add it to the back so I have a little bit of dimension, and I'm going to waver between the top of my card and the bottom of my card for my sentiment. You'll get a look at both of them. Let me know which one you like. I ended up settling on the top. I felt like the bottom was already bottom heavy, and so adding that sentiment to the top just maybe balanced it out a little bit more. I don't know. You can let me know. But once I get this down, that is going to complete my card for today. All of the products that I've used, as well as a link to the Adventure Awaits release, will be linked in the description box below. I'm going to show you a close-up of my card, and that concludes my project for today. So thank you so much for joining me. As always, I appreciate you. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks for watching.